The power of discipline in a Machiavellian world. There's something chillingly powerful about a person who is in complete control of themselves, not just in their words or their posture, but in their emotions, impulses, habits, and decisions. Someone who is so finely tuned, so focused and relentless in their purpose, that it becomes intimidating to those around them. The phrase "become so disciplined it scares them" isn't just a motivational quote. It echoes a centuries-old principle deeply embedded in the political writings of Niccolò Machiavelli. Best known for his controversial masterpiece The Prince, Machiavelli wasn't merely offering a guide to political manipulation. He was presenting a brutal, clear-eyed look at power, leadership, and what it takes to survive in a world ruled by ambition, chaos, and betrayal. Machiavelli understood something most people overlook: that true power begins not with dominating others, but with mastering oneself. Discipline, relentless, unwavering, and calculated, was, to him, one of the most critical tools for rulers, soldiers, and statesmen alike. In a world filled with unpredictable allies and treacherous enemies, a prince who maintained iron discipline could command not only respect but fear, making himself appear invincible, unshakable, and immune to manipulation. He could bend fortune to his will, not because he was lucky, but because he had trained himself to seize the right moment with ruthless precision. In other words, Machiavelli believed that disciplined leaders could shape destiny itself. This video dives deep into how Machiavelli's philosophy reflects the idea of becoming so disciplined that it unnerves others. We will examine what discipline meant to Machiavelli in both the personal and political sense, how it was used by historical figures he admired, and how his advice can be applied today, not only in politics but in business, personal development, and leadership. Through detailed analysis and modern interpretation, we'll uncover how Machiavelli's often misunderstood legacy is, in truth, a masterclass on the power of self-control and calculated strength. 1. Machiavellian discipline, a foundation of power. When Machiavelli wrote The Prince in 1513, he wasn't writing theory, he was responding to real political turmoil in Renaissance Italy. Florence, his homeland, had been overrun by foreign armies. The ruling Medici family had returned to power, and Machiavelli himself had been imprisoned and tortured. Out of this chaos emerged a political manual that stripped away illusions. In his view, leadership wasn't about virtue in the moral sense, but about virtù, a quality of strength, decisiveness, and strategic capability. At the core of virtù was discipline, the ability to control one's actions, emotions, and reputation in service of maintaining power. Discipline, to Machiavelli, meant being proactive rather than reactive. In chapter 25 of The Prince, he compares fortune to a wild river, unpredictable and destructive unless prepared for in advance. A disciplined leader, he argues, builds dikes and embankments during calm periods so that when the storm hits, the damage is minimized. This metaphor isn't just about military preparedness, it's about internal discipline, the foresight to train oneself, to regulate one's own behavior, to anticipate chaos and be ready to act swiftly. A leader without discipline, according to Machiavelli, is at the mercy of fate. A leader with it, however, can force fate to bend. Moreover, Machiavelli warned against indulgence and softness. He criticized leaders who became too comfortable, too trusting, or too dependent on others. In his analysis of Cesare Borgia, a political figure he admired, Machiavelli praised his ruthless decisiveness and the way he instilled fear through calculated action. Borgia's rise was due, in large part, to his relentless self-control and discipline in executing plans without hesitation or sentimentality. For Machiavelli, discipline was not just a personal virtue, it was the foundation upon which real power was built, maintained, and feared. 2. Fear and respect. The Machiavellian balance of discipline. One of the most famous and controversial lines in The Prince is Machiavelli's assertion that it is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. This phrase has often been misinterpreted as an endorsement of tyranny, but when read in context, it reveals a more nuanced idea, that the disciplined leader, through consistency and control, can earn fear in the sense of respect, even awe. Discipline is the mechanism through which this fear is generated. A ruler who is emotionally erratic, easily swayed or indulgent cannot inspire fear or respect, but one who is relentlessly composed, consistent in punishment and reward, and unshakable in crises becomes formidable. Fear, in Machiavelli's framework, is not about cruelty, at least not senseless cruelty. It's about predictability. People fear what they cannot manipulate. When a leader is disciplined in their behavior, they become unreadable and difficult to outmaneuver. That kind of psychological control instills a unique kind of fear, the fear of stepping out of line, of provoking a response that is swift, exact, and irrevocable. Machiavelli admired leaders who could govern this way, not through emotional outbursts, but through cold, rational enforcement of order. This form of fear creates a leadership style that doesn't rely on popularity. In modern terms, it's the CEO who doesn't need to be liked, but is respected because they are efficient, prepared, and never caught off guard. It's the general who commands unwavering loyalty because their troops trust in their judgment and fear the consequences of failure. Machiavelli believed that when a leader is so disciplined that their very presence demands order, chaos retreats. It is this presence, rooted in internal discipline, that makes others think twice before challenging authority. In essence, they are scared not of violence, but of the impenetrable strength that discipline produces. 3. The psychological warfare of self-control. At its core, Machiavelli's emphasis on discipline is a form of psychological warfare. Leaders, he suggests, must always be aware of how they are perceived. Every gesture, every word, and every public act must be calculated. A disciplined leader knows when to appear generous, and when to appear ruthless, when to show strength, and when to feign weakness. This is not deception in the immoral sense, it is strategy. Self-control becomes a weapon, allowing a leader to manipulate perception without ever losing command of themselves, and that, according to Machiavelli, is more frightening to adversaries than brute force. The power of this kind of psychological discipline lies in its subtlety. A person who never reacts emotionally, who never reveals too much, who moves with precision and restraint, such a person is unknowable and therefore unchallengeable. In political and social environments, unpredictability creates fear. But Machiavelli goes further. The disciplined individual doesn't just survive, they control the game. They set the pace. Others respond to them. In a world driven by reaction, the one who acts with forethought and self-control rules the narrative. This idea resonates far beyond politics. In leadership, business, negotiation, or even interpersonal relationships, the person with greater emotional discipline often controls the dynamic. Machiavelli's teachings suggest that developing such self-mastery is not optional for those who wish to lead, it's essential. And once someone becomes that composed, that calculated, that unwavering, it doesn't just earn respect, it unnerves people, it shakes them, because discipline, at its highest level, is power in its purest form. 4. Machiavelli's historical heroes, discipline in action. Machiavelli didn't merely theorize about power, he studied it through the lives of those who wielded it most effectively. In The Prince, he analyzes several historical figures whose success was built on their discipline and strategic behavior. Among them, Cesare Borgia stands out as Machiavelli's ideal prince. Despite being the illegitimate son of Pope Alexander VI, Borgia carved out political territory using cunning, ruthless decisiveness, and an unshakable sense of control. Machiavelli was particularly impressed with how Borgia managed to eliminate his enemies, consolidate power, and maintain public order, all while projecting an image of authority that left others afraid to challenge him. Borgia's methods were not necessarily moral, but they were disciplined. For instance, when Borgia needed to take control of the Romagna region, he appointed a cruel governor, Ramiro de Occo, to enforce strict order. Once stability was achieved, Borgia publicly executed de Occo, distancing himself from the brutality while sending a clear message. Borgia was in control, and nothing happened without his consent. This calculated move demonstrated a level of strategic discipline that Machiavelli praised. It wasn't about being kind or fair, it was about being effective, consistent, and intimidating in a way that solidified power. Another figure Machiavelli admired was Ferdinand of Aragon, who used religious rhetoric to justify war and expansion, all while quietly consolidating his kingdom's strength. Ferdinand's discipline came from his ability to maintain focus over time. He never acted impulsively, always planning far in advance, balancing appearances with action. These leaders, in Machiavelli's view, succeeded not because they were good men, but because they were disciplined men, relentless in their goals, unmoved by public opinion, and exacting in their execution. They scared their rivals not through theatrics, but through the quiet, controlled intensity of their rule. 5. Discipline versus morality. A necessary divide. One of the most controversial aspects of Machiavelli's philosophy is his rejection of conventional morality in leadership. To him, being good and being effective were not always compatible. In fact, a leader who clings too tightly to traditional virtues, like honesty, compassion, or generosity, could easily be manipulated or overthrown. Discipline, on the other hand, demands that a leader act according to what is necessary, not what is ideal. Machiavelli argued that the world is not governed by justice but by power dynamics, and the disciplined leader understands this and adapts accordingly. This doesn't mean Machiavelli celebrated cruelty for its own sake. Instead, he believed that discipline sometimes required doing morally uncomfortable things for the sake of political stability and long-term success. A prince must learn to act against faith, against charity, against humanity, and against religion when necessary. This isn't a call for immorality, it's a recognition that moral purity often leads to political failure. In his view, those who maintain power are not those who always do what's right, but those who do what is effective, without losing control or descending into chaos. Discipline is what keeps that balance intact. By separating morality from effectiveness, Machiavelli created space for a new kind of leader, one whose strength was not in virtue but in focus and restraint. Such a leader is terrifying not because they are evil, but because they are unpredictable by normal moral standards. They don't operate out of guilt or impulse, they act with cold logic. In today's world, we might think of CEOs, generals, or political leaders who make difficult decisions under pressure, cutting programs, firing people, or launching campaigns. Not because they want to, but because strategy demands it. To Machiavelli, that's the essence of disciplined leadership, prioritizing outcomes over appearances. 6. Modern parallels. Machiavelli in today's world. Though written in the 16th century, Machiavelli's principles are startlingly relevant today. In modern politics, business, and personal development, the idea of becoming so disciplined it scares them continues to echo. Look at highly effective leaders across industries, whether it's military commanders, tech CEOs, or elite athletes, and you'll see the Machiavellian archetype in action. These individuals command respect not just through talent, but through unwavering control over their time, emotions, and actions. Their discipline makes them formidable, They are hard to read, harder to predict, and nearly impossible to knock off balance. Consider someone like Steve Jobs. While not a prince in the literal sense, Jobs built Apple into a global empire with a leadership style that was deeply Machiavellian. He was known for his extreme attention to detail, emotional detachment in decision-making, and relentless pursuit of perfection. He could be harsh, even feared, but he maintained a level of focus and control that made his vision unstoppable. Jobs didn't succeed because he was warm or accommodating. He succeeded because his discipline in execution terrified competitors and galvanized those around him to match his intensity. In military and government spheres, the principle is just as evident. Leaders like General James Mattis or political figures, such as Angela Merkel, are respected not because they display emotional passion, but because they exude calm, controlled, disciplined leadership. Their words are measured, their actions calculated. In chaotic moments, they become the still center others gravitate toward. They don't rely on charisma. They rely on consistency. Machiavelli would argue that it is precisely this self-discipline, this refusal to be ruled by emotion or public opinion, that makes these modern leaders so compelling, and in some cases intimidating. 7. Discipline as strategy, controlling the narrative. To Machiavelli, discipline was not simply about personal habits, it was a political and strategic weapon. In a world where perception often outweighs truth, controlling how others see you becomes just as important as controlling reality itself. A disciplined leader knows this, and carefully crafts their image to maintain authority and inspire fear or respect. This doesn't mean being fake, it means being intentional. Every action, word, and even silence becomes part of a calculated narrative that positions the leader as calm, capable, and in control, even in times of uncertainty. A perfect example of this is Machiavelli's recommendation for rulers to appear virtuous, even if they are not. He emphasizes that it is important to appear merciful, faithful, humane, sincere, religious, but also to be prepared to act in the opposite way when the situation demands. The key, however, is consistency in the image projected. Discipline here isn't just about emotional control, it's about brand control. The disciplined leader never lets the mask slip, because once perception is lost, power follows. This foresight and restraint allow the leader to remain untouchable in the eyes of both enemies and allies. Strategic discipline also means knowing when not to act. Many leaders falter because they act out of impatience or fear. Machiavelli teaches that sometimes inaction is the most powerful move, especially when it creates ambiguity. A disciplined leader waits, watches, and strikes only when the time is right. They train themselves to delay gratification, to resist provocation, and to always stay 2 steps ahead. This kind of control unnerves adversaries because it's difficult to predict or manipulate. When a leader refuses to react on impulse, it leaves others uncertain, and in uncertainty, there is power. 8. The fear factor, intimidation through self-mastery. Machiavelli never advocated for senseless cruelty, but he understood that fear, when used strategically, was an effective tool for maintaining order and protecting authority. The most enduring kind of fear, he suggests, doesn't come from violence, it comes from awe. When a person is so well disciplined that they appear immune to chaos, others instinctively defer to them. This isn't fear of punishment, it's fear of confronting someone who is operating on a higher level of control. That kind of fear, Machiavelli knew, was far more sustainable than fear built on terror alone. This plays out in both leadership and everyday life. Consider elite athletes, stoic military commanders, or successful entrepreneurs who operate with laser focus. They don't yell or posture. Instead, their calm, unshakable presence communicates volumes. Their control over themselves suggests they also have control over everything else. People are often intimidated not by what these individuals do, but by what they don't do, react emotionally, over-explain, or second-guess themselves. Their silence can be more powerful than someone else's shouting. This is Machiavellian fear, not based on aggression but on undeniable command. Furthermore, fear rooted in discipline earns respect, not hatred. Machiavelli warned that cruelty should be swift and calculated, not drawn out or excessive. Similarly, the fear created by disciplined behavior isn't about making others suffer, it's about reminding them that they're dealing with someone who is beyond emotional manipulation. It's about creating a boundary that few dare to cross. When someone operates at this level of self-control, they force others to raise their game or retreat. And in a competitive world, this intimidation becomes a distinct advantage that cannot be faked. Conclusion: building your own Machiavellian discipline. Become so disciplined it scares them isn't just a catchy phrase. It's a lifestyle philosophy with roots that stretch back over 500 years to Machiavelli's most influential works. His message, often misunderstood, was not about being evil or manipulative. It was about understanding the world as it is, not as we wish it to be, and developing the internal strength to survive and thrive within it. At the core of his teachings is the belief that power begins with the mastery of self. A leader who cannot control themselves cannot hope to control anything else. To adopt Machiavellian discipline today is to train yourself in the art of restraint, awareness, and long-term thinking. It means waking up each day with intention, not emotion. It means making decisions based on strategy, not popularity. And it means preparing for crisis before it arrives, so that when the storm comes, you don't flinch. People may not understand this level of focus. They may call it cold or robotic, but they will respect it, and, in many cases, fear it. Because true discipline is rare, and rare things are powerful. In a world that rewards speed, emotion, and distraction, becoming deeply disciplined sets you apart. It gives you leverage, stability, and edge. Whether you're building a business, leading a team, pursuing excellence, or simply trying to master yourself, Machiavelli's philosophy offers a blueprint, not for deception, but for power through self-mastery. And when you reach that level, you won't need to demand respect. You'll command it, silently, relentlessly, and with the quiet force of someone who has made themselves truly untouchable.